How's it going, Eliminators? Today, I'm going to be showing you how to solve a very simple but common issue that plagues quite a few snowblowers. So let's get right into it. So in front of us today, we have just your average Craftsman snowblower. This one here is an 825. And just like you, we're prepping this for winter. One of the first things you're gonna do, most likely, is change your oil. Now, in this particular snowblower, it has an oil drain tube coming out of the right side of the engine block. Some of them have the oil drain tube coming out of the rear, and the issue happens to both of these designs. What you're gonna notice is when you go to use a wrench to remove the oil tube cap here for the drain, the entire pipe turns. You see that? So what a lot of people do is they go ahead and get themselves a pair of pliers, they open them up, and they hold them onto the pipe. Once that's clamped down, you can then go ahead and remove your oil drain cap there and drain out your engine oil. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to permanently fix that, and it will only take you about 2 to 5 minutes to solve the issue, but the downtime could potentially be up to about 24 hours, and we'll get into that in a little bit. What you're going to notice here though is that I've put a couple 2x4s underneath the right tire to lift up the side with the oil drain tube. So this engine already has the oil drained out of it. Now what that's going to do is allow any remaining bits of oil to flow to the other end of the engine to help keep them away from the pipe threads. And we'll get into why that's important in a bit. But first, we're going to go ahead and remove the drain tube. Now, removing the drain tube on this is simple. As I said, the tube tends to move when you go and use your 5/8 wrench on the oil drain cap there. So I'm just going to go ahead and unthread that to remove the tube. And as I mentioned, tilting the machine up on the side that has the drain tube makes disassembly a whole lot cleaner. What you're going to notice if you don't tilt your machine is that every time you go ahead and wipe those threads, more oil is slowly going to leak out of the engine. And we don't want that, and I'll get into why we don't want that in just a minute. So over here on the workbench, we can see that there is a little bit of oil residue on the oil drain pipe. I'm going to go ahead and clean that off. First, I'm just going to take it to my wire wheel on my bench grinder. Now, once you've cleaned up the majority of the gunk off of the threads using the wire wheel, we want to get the rest of the oily residue off of the threads. So I'm just going to spray this with a little bit of brake cleaner. Go ahead and wipe that off because having clean threads is going to be important for our next step. Now, in order to get a tight bond between the oil drain pipe and the engine block, we're going to be using some thread locker today. In front of you, you're going to notice there are two different types of thread locker, but I just want to point out it doesn't matter which brand of thread locker you use, but a big shout out goes to Permatex for sending this our way. First off, on the left, we have a newer type of thread locker, and this is known as a gel twist, and sometimes you can also call it a thread locker paste. And just in case you don't know, blue thread locker is going to seal up your threads and give it a nice tight seal, and red thread locker is going to give you a near permanent bond. If you look at the directions on the front, it says that heat or special tools are required for disassembly. So if you want something to not come out, such as this oil drain pipe, we're going to be using the red. However, this is a liquid and this is a gel, and I'll get into the differences quickly between the two without getting too scientific. Basically, the gel or thread locker paste helps repel against water and small amounts of oil. Whereas if you were to use a liquid thread locker and there was a little bit of oil remnants left in the threads, the oil could mix itself with the liquid thread locker and affect your curing process. For the sake of not doing a science experiment on my own equipment, I'm going to be sticking with red liquid thread locker. Now, ideally, you want to use a red thread locker on your pipe because we don't want it to come out. I don't have red in the gel. I only have red in the liquid. So this works out perfectly for me. However, I just wanted to point out the differences between the gel thread locker and the liquid as shown here. So basically, if you guys were in a hurry and you didn't want to spend the 1 or 2 minutes that it takes to tilt up your machine and wipe out the threads, you could go ahead and use a little bit of thread locker gel or thread locker paste, and it should work all right. But if you're like me and don't mind spending a couple extra minutes to do the job properly, go ahead and tilt up your machine, clean out those threads, and then you could use a little bit of red liquid thread locker on that oil drain pipe. Now, you may remember near the beginning of the video, I mentioned that while this job may only take like 2 to 5 minutes to do, you may run into approximately a 24-hour downtime. So what was I referring to there? Well, this red thread locker here, the curing time is approximately 24 hours. So that means that ideally you want to apply the thread locker to the threads, go ahead and tighten the drain tube back into the engine block, and then you want to let this sit for 24 hours so that that red thread locker can properly cure, and it will create a tight bond between the oil drain tube and the engine block. Now, if you don't let that thread locker properly cure onto the oil drain tube, you go ahead and put oil in this thing after installing the pipe, and then you fire this thing up. The oil and the heat could all affect the curing process, and you may not get as tight as a bond as you would get if you just wait the 24 hours and let the product properly cure. With that being said, I've just cleaned out the threads one last time on the engine block, so we can now go ahead and apply the thread locker to the oil drain pipe. And because I don't want this oil drain pipe to come out, I've coated all of the threads with some red thread locker here. So we'll go ahead and install this onto the engine. We can now go ahead and tighten this up. And once the pipe stops moving, you could go ahead and switch to your locking pliers just to make sure that you don't strip the threads off of the end of the cap. So while we are trying to tighten this up fairly tight, we have to remember this is a pipe thread and this is an aluminum engine block. So you could end up stripping the threads internally on the engine block, and that's not good. You don't want to do that. So just go ahead and tighten the pipe up until it's snug, and then we'll let this thing sit for 24 hours, and we'll let the thread lockers bond hold that oil drain pipe into position so that the next time we go to drain our oil, all we'll have to do is use our 5/8 wrench on our oil drain cap here, loosen that off, and we'll never have to worry about that oil drain pipe ever coming loose again. Now, if you're working by yourself, you may not need to do this. However, if you're like me and have other people in the shop with you, it's always nice to hang a little tag off of anywhere on the engine that lets someone know there is no oil in the engine. I take these tags off of brand new equipment, and they are awesome for preventing an engine from seizing up, because you could be in a position where you drain the oil on this snowblower here, you're letting the thread locker cure, you come out the next day and you forget that you didn't put oil in it, you go ahead and fire up your engine, and you could end up seizing an engine. So hanging that little tag off of the back of the snowblower will just prevent that from happening by serving as a reminder that there's no oil in this engine. And I'll go ahead and put some oil in it before I fire it up for the next time. Well, that's going to wrap up today's video. Like I said, very quick, very simple to do. A lot of you DIYers probably have some type of red thread locker around the house, and if not, it's very inexpensive to purchase. And if you follow the steps in this video, you'll never have to worry about that oil drain pipe coming loose ever again. With that being said, if you guys enjoyed the video, think about leaving me a thumbs up. You know, it really helps me out. You can click here to subscribe and click over here to watch one of my previous videos. I upload every single week, so be sure to stop on by next week, check channel out for new content. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.